Welcome, everybody. This is Dr. Josh Long with AME Podcasts. This podcast is actually sponsored by Art and Music Emporium, which is serving artistic excellence. We do these podcasts to talk to individuals who kind of continue making music beyond the normal classroom, and this adult music education topic that I've been talking about through this. If you're watching this on YouTube, it would be great if you subscribe to our channel. We also have a profile on Facebook at Art Music Emporium or Joshua E. Long that you can like, as well as we do have a Patreon account if you are interested in contributing anything. All the proceeds obviously go to helping people continue music education through lifelong learning, as I call it. I do want to share a few things of some initiatives that we have going on beyond our podcasts. We do have the annual Community Band by the Sea, which is actually going down in Wildwood, New Jersey, this July 27th. And we also have the Bethlehem Steel Company Legacy Band, which is going to be going on August 10th in Music Fest. You can actually participate if you do play an instrument or come and listen to us. You don't have quite a bit of rehearsal time as we do rehearse the day before. So if you're interested about any of those, do check out artmusicemporium.com or obviously message me through any of the platforms you see this on. I'm excited about our next guest that we have, Jim Shufelt. I know he was at the U.S. Army Military Academy, also was at the War College as a professor. And I know he's very well involved as the president of the Carlisle Town Band. And I'm really excited to talk about him. I met him through the East Coast Band Conference that is held in Ringgold at the Ringgold Band Shell, or Band Hall. I keep saying Shell. But we're excited to actually meet him. So actually, Jim, why don't you take it away?
Well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks, Joshua, for asking me to participate. As you said, I'm a retired Army officer. I like to tell people I'm a soldier who was also a musician, unlike a lot of people who are musicians and are also soldiers, in that I did not go into the Army to be a musician. I went to West Point, became an officer, and I was an armored cavalry officer my entire life. I grew up in Northern Virginia, played music there in the great Fairfax County school system, and then played for a couple years as trumpet player at West Point. We had a little cadet pet band, and then didn't play for a long time. I'm a typical comeback player. And about 15 years later, I picked it back up and started playing with the Commonwealth Brass Band in Louisville, Kentucky. And then for the rest of my time in the Army, every place I was able to find a group to play with. So when we moved to Carlisle, the very first thing I did was go to the local music store and I said, I'm looking for a community band. And they said, you need to call this person and join the Carlisle band, which was literally about 2 blocks away. So I did. I was a war college student there for a year, played with them then, went away for 6 years, came back to Carlisle, and I've been there ever since. And as soon as I came back, I rejoined the band. And like a lot of civic organizations in a military town, which Carlisle is, they love retired military officers. We're usually very happy to take on leadership roles. And so I've had a number of positions in the town band. And then I've been the president for now my 5th year. And it's been a very neat opportunity for me. Carlisle has an amazing, rich history for music. And I realized it was reinforced for me when I went to the band conference at with the Ringgold Band Hall, which, by the way, is just, if you've never been there, for people watching, is an amazing history lesson in itself, just to see the displays on the wall. We have a similar band hall with some nice displays, but about 10% of what the Ringgold Band has. We just have to dig out our archives and find some more. But what I found with the band in Carlisle, and by the way, our official name is the Carlisle Band.
Okay.
We became known as the Carlisle Town Band because for many years there were multiple bands in town.
Oh, okay.
And so that was how you differentiated us, that was the town band. But our official legal name is the Carlisle Band, and it's the parent organization of the town band, which is a normal concert band, and a British brass band, which we've had for about 5 years. And I'm in both of those bands. what I love the most about a community band, and Carlisle is a perfect example of it, is I would be hard pressed to find another civic organization in the town that gives you such a great mix of people from throughout the town.
Mhm.
And the example I'll give you is we have in the town, we've got retired surgeons, we have retired lawyers, we have, of course, a large handful of music educators. We have 3 or 4 retired military musicians. We have professional musicians, non-military. We have high school kids. We have college kids. And the age range on a given day ranges from about 15 to 85 or 86. And so, if you really want to get to know a community, to me, one of the best ways is to join a community band because you never know who you're going to be sitting next to. And you will learn more about that community than you just about will any other way. And that's one of the reasons why I love it so much. The other reason I love this band is it has an amazing musical heritage. Um, I like to kind of organize my mind and think about community bands in this way. You have the top tier bands, and I put Ringgold is probably in there, but every state
Mhm.
has 1 or 2 bands that are nationally known,
Mhm.
and that's great. And then you have kind of what I call tier 2 bands, and that's ones that are pretty good. They're evolving, but they're not your base level. We kind of get together and play the same music every week, every year. We've done it the
Mhm.
whole life, and it's not very difficult. We're in that tier 2, and I see us evolving, and I really think we can be a high tier 2 or a low tier 1 band because we've had some great directors and we have a marvelous mix of musicians. And I just have been amazed in the 24 years I've been associated with this band to watch it go from maybe 30 people playing enthusiastically, I'll put it that way,
Mhm.
um, to a band now which we're wrestling with the size of our band hall because we had normally have 70 people in our rehearsals
Wow.
in a band hall that's probably made for about 50. Um, and they're all pretty darn good. And that's just a neat kind of organization to be in, to see one that is developed over time like that. And I think it's on a path to continue developing. So, I mean, any questions about that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have a couple. I have a couple different things I want to ask you about. So if you don't mind, I'm going to kind of jump back to and I know with this podcast, feel free to speak freely. I know you were a little worried in the beginning because I know like I've had a lot of music educators on there, and it's just great because you have a great insight of community bands just because, and I know you're now president. And I guess my first question I had for you, and then we're gonna dig deep into the Carlisle
Yeah.
band, was like, so you didn't play for a while. So if you remember, what led you getting back to playing your instrument?
Oh, that's a wonderful story. Uh, as I said, I started playing the trumpet in the Fairfax County school system in a great middle school and superb high school band program. My high school trumpet teacher, well, actually, my private teacher for 5 years had been the first trumpet in the Army band. He was then the official Army bugler till he retired, and just was had a very good preparation. But I figured out pretty early on that as good as I was not probably professional quality, and I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to be an officer in the Army, so that's why I
Mhm.
went to West Point.
Mhm.
So I didn't play for a while. And, like every good aspiring high school trumpet players, I had a great trumpet. I had a box
Mhm.
strad and I loved that horn and it went with me everywhere. And one day I get a phone call from my cousin, and he went on to be a trumpet performance major at Indiana and was a professional musician for a while. And he said, "Hey, Jim, could I possibly borrow your horn? Can I buy it from you?" And I said, "I'll tell you what, I will lend it to you on one condition, and that is you take care of it. And whenever you stop playing, just give it back. And if you never stop playing, it's yours for the rest of your life." And he said, "Great." So he took it off to college, did great. Like I said, he was a professional musician for about 10 years. As soon as I gave that horn away, it was like I had ripped my heart out. And it's the only way I can explain it. It was like, what have I done? And I hadn't played it in a long time. So it was like,
Uh-huh.
oh.
Mhm.
So we had just moved to Fort Knox, Kentucky. We were living in temporary quarters, and our temporary quarters. And I went for a run one day. I'm out for a run, and I run past a yard sale, and I see a flash of silver, and I run over to it, and it's this pretty beat up student Yamaha trumpet. And I looked at it. I said, "What do you want for it?" And she said, $75. I said, "Well, 50." And she said, "Okay." I said, "Hold it." I ran home, got money, came back, grabbed it, and so now I have a horn. About the same time, there was an article in the newspaper, the Louisville paper, that talked about a new brass band that had formed called the Commonwealth Brass Band. And I'm talking to my wife. She said, "Well, you got to think about doing that." So I called them up, and they said, "Sure." And all I have is this beat up old trumpet. And so I went up there and rehearsed with them a couple times, sitting in the back row. It's always fun to be in the back row of a brass band. And I said, "This is really fun." And so I bought a cornet. And from that point on, just about every place I was able to find some kind of organization. And probably the funniest one was when I got to Germany. I was commanding a cavalry squadron in Germany, and I showed up and I said, "I'm looking for a community band to play in." And they said, "Well, there's a village band right next to the caserne." So for a couple of years, I played in the Niederwerner Musikanter, which was a
Wow.
German Oompa band in a little village. I was the only American in the band. The only other person who really spoke any English was, we had one girl whose father had been American and she lived in America for a while and come back. And the director spoke a little bit of English, and I spoke a smattering of German, so we were able to make it work. And it was just a load of fun. And I told them I can only be here about probably a third of the time. I probably didn't even make that. They were happy to have me. And so that kind of started me in, finding a band to play in and just doing what I could. And that's how I came back to it.
Well, that's awesome. And it's great that how you described it, just because, as I was telling you a little bit before we started the podcast, it's like I'm talking to these people that I guess, and I will share this with the audience, as I say, and they probably heard it a couple times, but I have friends who stopped and just have not gotten back to it. And I know life gets in the way. I get it, and jobs get, you want to focus
Yeah.
different on jobs. I get that, but it's kind of neat how that spark it continued with you, and especially when, losing your horn, feeling that, you know what I mean? Even
I've made up for it. I have the trumpet player's dilemma. I have way too many horns, but but it's just interesting because it was such a big part of my life growing up.
Mhm,
And once I started back up, like everybody, I realized that my brain and my fingers pretty well remembered what to do. My
mhm,
lip, not so much, but that came back,
yeah.
and I've just continued to develop. I also tell everybody I'm still trying to get to the point I was when I was a good 13-year-old trumpet player. I don't know if I'll ever get to that point again. I was pretty fearless back then. I'm not fearless anymore when it comes to playing.
And that's cool the way you described it too, because I tell people that too, and I just want to point that out, how when you're playing your instrument in the beginning, it's like your fingers, it'll come back. It will come back.
Yeah,
It's like riding a bike, right? If you
yeah,
haven't rode
yeah.
one in a while, where you can do that. So I kind of fast forwarding a little bit. I know you were involved with groups, and that's great to
Mhm,
hear that you've kind of continued. And I guess my one question that I wanted to get to is, kind of getting into talking a little bit more about the Carlisle band, is the fact that you took more of an administrative role,
mhm.
as being a president. And I was just, and I know you've done it for 5 years, as you've already said, but I was just interested in seeing where, and don't take this the wrong way, but where did that happen? Where, you're just a guy that's just playing instrument, who
Yeah.
wants to continue, and now you're getting involved with an organization to kind of help it along. I'll say it that way.
Well, that's a great question, and a lot of it has to do with when I came back to the band. When I left the band, it was about 30 people. I think we were lucky to have 4 or 5 trumpets on any given day,
Mhm.
and we had a superb solo cornet, retired thoracic surgeon who we used to say if he was half the surgeon that he was a cornet player, he must have been a really good surgeon because this gentleman could have very easily been a professional musician. He was just a superb musician and a superb surgeon. But I usually sat next to him. I was like, I used to say, well, of the 5, I'm like number 2. I came back 6 years later, and we suddenly had 14 or 15 trumpet players, and I realized that I'm like number 6 or 7, and that's okay. I mean, I have no
Mhm.
problem with that. I was,
Sure.
I would say I'll play any part. I don't really care.
Yeah.
I'm happy playing any part I can. But as I looked at the band, I got asked, "Hey, would you like to be an officer?" And I finally said, "Okay, I will." And I was the secretary for a while, and then I was the vice president for a while.
Mhm.
But I always said, I will not be the president of this band until I'm fully retired from working, because I knew what it would take to do it. I could do the other jobs pretty much, on my own, but the president of the band is a pretty time consuming task. I'm just doing things all the time for it, either at home or going over the band hall.
Mhm.
So two things happened as I retired on 1 January, 4 or 5 years ago. The first one was I became the president.
Mhm.
The second one was COVID hit.
Okay.
So the first 2 years I was the president of the band was we were wrestling with COVID and how to keep
Mhm.
the band. And not that I had any great ideas, but I, pretty organized after all those years of being in the Army. And so we kind of sat down and talked about what we had to do and what were the rules, what was the state telling us, and most of it was what was the state not telling us,
Uh-huh.
and how did we take advantage of what we had, because we do own our own facility. That was the ace in the hole. And how can we make the most of that and keep the core of the band playing?
Mhm.
And so that was for the first 2 years. That's what we did, and I love to talk about that one because we learned a lot of lessons doing that, and I think I
Mhm.
can honestly say we were successful.
Mhm.
Uh, the funny thing that happens is I've talked to several directors, and I'm a musician. I know what I like to play, and I make suggestions, but I quickly learned that there's the director's lane and there's my lane, and my lane is pretty much administrative and logistics, and that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah.
They'll say, "What are we going to do?" And I'll say, "Well, have you thought about this?" Thank you very much. And the plan comes out, and likely we've got good directors, and I've never questioned what they picked.
Uh-huh.
But that's been an interesting side of it. The brass band's a little different because I was kind of in the brass band from the beginning. So,
Okay.
uh, in it's been a little more interactive with the directors because
Okay.
we only had two of us who had ever played in a British brass band before.
Mhm.
So we could provide our experiences, and both of us have pretty extensive music and CD collections, so we could kind of say, here's something we ought to try or look at, and
Mhm.
and so a little more interactive with what we decide to play with the brass band.
Oh, very good. Cool. And if I may ask too, kind of go on that side of the administration, I know you spend a lot of time, and I like to get this out because I've been on that side of the administration where, just as you, I don't know if you're interested in explaining just a little bit about what you do as far as the
Yeah,
president, and how you keep how you keep the band moving forward, right? And then we'll talk
yeah,
about the pandemic. Actually, I think that's a
good.
good topic, but why don't we'll start with that question first,
Well,
if that's okay.
we're a not-for-profit corporation.
Mhm.
We have been a corporation since 1900. That's when we kind of, if you look at our banners, they say founded 1900. Well, that's when the legal entity of the Carlisle Band
Mhm.
was created. It actually existed long before that, starting in 1844.
Mhm.
Um, and so, my job, obviously, set the agendas for the meetings, make sure that we are uh, supervising the board. We have a very active board that really takes care of the building, takes care of the programming, takes care of maintenance, takes care of the equipment. There's a lot of stuff there, and I always tell
Mhm.
people when we ask for funds, is we own a house, and
Mhm.
all the things you do in your house we have to do on that band hall, and it's a 75-year-old building, so a lot of our attention is on maintaining that building.
Mhm.
And 75-year-old buildings tend to have 75-year-old building problems. Um, I work with the director and the business manager in finding opportunities to perform.
Mhm.
Between the two bands, in this year, we're going to perform more than 30 times.
Wow.
So we have a very busy schedule. A lot of it are kind of fixed things. We always know we go to this location around this time of year and all that. But there's a continuing effort to find new venues, to find new
Mhm.
sponsors. Um, that's one of the big things I do, pursuing grants
Mhm.
to get us some funding for some of our big concerts every year, looking for sponsors, um, working on documenting the history. I mean, it's kind of like I said, we have a good board and they do a lot of good things, and they kind of run on their own. I just kind of steer the ship a little bit when I need to, and it keeps running. I mean, the biggest challenge every year is, of course, finding a couple of new people to get on the board.
Mhm.
and I kind of beat people up and say, we all need to have a role in this beast. And we can usually get in every year a couple new people we bring in as trustees or something like that, so they can kind of learn how the band operates administratively. And we've been very lucky in that we've never had a problem of we've never been unable to get people. That's been really good.
That's nice.
And we did have a treasurer retire last year who'd been the treasurer for 20 years. And we took about a year to find somebody, but we have somebody, he's fit right in. He's doing a great job at it. So, that was the one hurdle I was really worried about, but it sorted itself out.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Well, it's just thinking about that. I mean, there's so many, and I know this, and obviously you know this,
Yeah.
but there's just so many under the things under the radar that nobody sees, with
Yeah.
the band, as far as like, oh, they'll see the band performing, or even a musician who comes out just to be a part of the band. I mean, it's just like you said, keeping the house going. I mean, you have a place and the upkeep on everything, and insurances and
Oh
grants
yeah.
and
It's,
money.
it,
It's a whole
you know,
business.
whenever I normally get a couple minutes in all the concerts, and I thank everybody for their support. And by the way, we don't pay dues. There are no fees for being in the band. We do not charge admission to any of our concerts. We survive on what few small grants we get, but primarily on donations from the band members, sponsors, patrons, audience, and the venues that we perform at. And it's like in Dickens, if you're plus one pence at the end of the year, you're happy. If you're under, you're not. And luckily, we normally come out okay. And we have a bit of a reserve that sits there, basically for when the 75-year-old roof goes, and we have to repair it, or the HVAC goes.
Yeah, right.
But those are big deals.
Uh-huh.
But we're in a good financial position, but it takes work. It takes work every day. And we are very blessed by a very supportive community. That's the best thing I can say. We have some people that have been bent over backwards to help us out. We've gotten grants from a number of institutions in town over the years to help us do things, and we're very lucky in that respect.
Yeah, it's great to hear. I know, because it's just as you said. I mean, unfortunately, it takes money for everything,
Yeah.
as you know, to keep everything rolling forward. So I thought we'd kind of bounce back a little bit. I know you mentioned the pandemic, and
Yeah.
if you want to share a little bit about that, and I do want to say this. I'm happy to see that you've kind of continued moving forward, just because
Yeah.
I've heard of some groups that didn't make it.
Oh,
That just
it was. I was playing in a little pickup group for Wreaths Across America in January, I guess it was, and just talking to folks in that who represented a number of bands from around the Pennsylvania-Maryland border, and everybody was talking about how the number of opportunities to perform have gone down, it's getting harder to get paid, all those kinds of things. We did not have any major problems in that area, and I'll kind of explain why. Again, we have our own band hall, and that's number one. We didn't have to worry about a church telling us we couldn't come there anymore, or school saying you can't come there anymore. We owned our own space. And you probably know this, Pennsylvania did not come out with any clear guidance at all for musical organizations, nothing. So we had to take what they put out as far as, what were good techniques to make sure that the area was sanitized and people were tested. And there were things that came out about, capacity of room and square footage and how many people you could have. So we were able to look at our band hall, and it's kind of funny. We have a small foyer and a large rehearsal space, and we actually figured out, at the worst case, because other than that 1 month when none of us could do anything, we could then go back and start rehearsing. We could put 10 people in one room, 14 in the other, and the director in the hallway in between. We actually did that for a while. We wore masks with holes in them. We put covers on the bells because there was this evolving thing that said you needed to do that. We tested everybody's temperature when they came in. We had sanitizer everywhere. We did all that kind of stuff. And then, it loosened up a little bit, but we were never able to get the whole band together. So what we did was we would do sectionals. We would have brass sectional one Monday. The next Monday we'd have a woodwind sectional. And then the brass band, because that total number we could put in there was like 28. Well, a brass band, if you have everybody there, is like 31 people. So we were able to continue to rehearse with the brass band. So between those two sectionals and the brass band, we ended up with the core of the band continued to rehearse throughout that whole period where there were these tight restrictions. And then as things started loosening up and you could perform, the brass band was ready right away to start performing.
Hmm.
So for a couple of years, the only organization that was making money in performances with donations at venues was the brass band.
Hmm.
And so between all of that, and again, loyal supporters who kept on funding us,
Hmm.
we didn't go in a hole. And when we hit our first group rehearsal after all the restrictions were lifted, our band director, Dave Rohr, and I looked at each other at the end of that rehearsal and said, wow. Because Dave he goes, I thought we were going to be starting, at ground zero. He said, we're not, we're just a step or two below where we were when we shut down. So that enabled us to just dive back in and just make the most of it. The other positive thing I will say is we were very adamant with our membership that do not come if you feel ill. Just it's not worth fighting it. Just don't come. And if you get COVID, you're positive, you call myself or the director. We'll protect you, but we'll make sure anybody that was in a close circle with you knows that something happened. They can watch themselves. And I honestly don't know of anybody in the band that got COVID, and we had many people that did, but got it in the band. And until about 2 weeks ago, I would say we did not lose anybody. Unfortunately, we just lost somebody about 2 weeks ago that was one of the elderly members of the band who had long COVID and had a lot of other medical issues, and it all just kind of passed away. But to that point, we didn't lose anybody in the band. And I'm just, I guess I can say I'm proud of that fact. People complained about what we did, but I explained why we're doing it, and here's the guidance we got. We got through it. And I told a few people, if you don't want to do this, just don't come. We're suspending all of our attendance rules. We're not going to take, we're going to take a head count who's here. So if somebody does turn up positive, we know who was in the rehearsal. But we're not counting that as, in all of our bylaws and active membership. We're suspending all of it. So if you don't come for 2 years because you don't think it's safe or you don't want to follow the rules, that's okay. And so we didn't lose anybody to that either.
That's
So
great.
that's good.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, because I know some some groups just stop for the 2 years, and it's hard to get. It's like starting from, just like you said, ground zero. So that's so so that's good that that you folks kind of continued, and especially rehearsing too, because I know a lot of people were scared to do that, but it seemed like you were trying, and I was well. This was in a college, but I was teaching, and we were teaching everybody remotely, and that was not fun.
No,
So.
and we did remote board meetings by Zoom, and that worked okay once everybody got through the hurdle of technically figuring out how to do it.
Yep.
And because it wasn't just us, my daughter works in IT in Chicago, and they support law firms. And the first couple of months of everybody going home was pretty humorous. Because the partners who've never had to do anything with their computer suddenly have to figure out how to do all that stuff. But they figured it all out, and we figured it out.
So. Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. So so I wanted to talk. You have two groups, so I thought maybe we'll take each of them, one by one. So let's start a little bit with the brass band, for example. And I was just interested in, it seems like the group's been around for a while. And I'm just kind of interested to see of what kind of performances the group does, that ensemble does, as well as obviously I know it's brass, I get that, but more or less kind of the focus of how it works hand in hand with the Carlisle band. Then we'll kind of jump into the Carlisle band. If that's cool.
That's another good question. The first thing is get everybody who's in the two bands are a member of the Carlisle band.
Oh, okay.
15 members of the brass band, about half the brass band are members of the town band, and about 15 of the others are from other organizations around the area. As I said, there were two of us about 5 years ago who had been in British brass bands, and we just had been talking about it for years and saying we ought to do this. We pass around CDs, and everybody loved the sound. So we finally said, let's just do it. And so we stood it up. And the other gentleman had been the town band director at one point, and he was our initial brass band director. And so he had experience in a very good band, the Spires Band down in Frederick, Maryland.
Okay.
And I was in one that was not as good as the Spires Band, but it was also a NABA band, the one in Kentucky. So we had some idea of kind of the standard repertoire.
Okay.
So we started, just gone the classic British brass band repertoire, and then kind of building up from there. And a lot of it was kind of the old, build it, they will come. People heard about it. We got people say, "Hey, I heard you're building a brass band. Can I join that?" Sure, come on over. And so we kind of went, 20 people to 25, and now we've got about 35 on the roster because having a few extras doesn't hurt. And
Mm-hmm.
we have not done anything competitively, so we haven't had to go through that, getting down to the specific instrumentation. Although we play all the right instruments, but we might have an
Right.
extra tuba or an extra cornet or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What we have found with the brass band is it lends itself to a lot of the traditional concerts the town band used to do, but the town band has outgrown.
Okay.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
we play at a lot of the retirement homes around here. One of the big industries in Carlisle is retirement homes.
Mm-hmm.
And around us, there are probably a dozen retirement homes. And so over the years, we have hit every one of them, and there's 7 or 8 of them that we hit every year routinely. So for about half of those, the brass band goes, just because the performance space in those facilities doesn't take 65 or 70 people. And rather paring down the town band, the brass band does it. And that's always been interesting, and people enjoy it because it's something different
Mm-hmm.
to hear the brass band play. The other thing that we do a lot of, and this has been a growth industry over the last 2 years, and it's kind of an interesting one, is we do a lot of stuff in support of the Army War College.
Hmm.
And what has happened is it's harder and harder to get a service band.
Mm-hmm.
There are fewer and fewer of them. They just announced about a month ago all the Air National Guard bands are going away.
Mm-hmm.
The only time that the War College is kind of guaranteed a band is for their opening ceremony in August.
Mm-hmm.
So they used to get a Guard band for the resident course in June, and then they were always scrambling to find one for the distance education course graduation in August. So about 3 years ago, they came to us and they said, "Can you do the distance education course with the brass band?" And we said, "We'd love to." And so we started that. And then a couple of years ago, they said, "Can you pick up both of them?" And we said, "Absolutely." It's
Mm-hmm.
really a pretty easy gig because it's scripted. It doesn't change much.
Mm-hmm.
We know what the music is. And we can always throw in a new patriotic piece we've learned at the front or the end. But the actual ceremony is pretty specific, and we know what we're going to play. The nice thing about those is they pay us generously,
Mm-hmm.
because and at that we are still much cheaper than when they had to pay for a reserve or guard band to come, because when they come they have to pay for it, transportation, all that kind of stuff. So that has turned out to be a win-win. So we get multiple opportunities to play for those audiences. The band makes the big band makes nice little money to go in the coffer. And then we also have the Army Heritage Center, which is the Army Heritage and Education Center, which sits, it's off post, it's open to the public, and it's kind of a quasi museum and experiential learning facility. Well, they do a number of activities there, and every year we've played there once or twice, and they're a lot of fun. In fact, in June we're going to play for the commemoration of D-Day, June 15th. We will do it's basically the annual dinner for the foundation, but it's commemorating D-Day, the what's it now, the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And so we'll do a World War II themed concert with the brass band. And so we'll play a lot of traditional military music. We'll play a lot of swing music, because brass bands can swing pretty good.
Yeah.
And so that'll be a really fun concert. And then we normally have a formal spring concert and fall concert with the brass band also, which is playing a little more of the traditional repertoire,
Mm-hmm.
and the more modern stuff. We have a new director. He's kind of fun because he's got a number of friends that he went to college with that are in brass bands, so he's reaching out to them and getting music.
Yeah.
So we continue to expand our repertoire. We hope to go maybe next year or the year after to actually go to NABA and compete. We this year, one of our challenges, we took the third section piece of music. It was a Holst piece by Imogene Holst called "The Unfortunate Traveler," and we played that for our spring concert, just to kind of get our hands around playing a competition piece. And so we'll do that again next year. And it kind of depends on finances, but our goal is to eventually get to NABA. We've also played at the Gettysburg Brass Band Festival a couple of times.
Oh, wow.
always a fun venue to play at. Um, we haven't broken onto the main stage on the main day yet. That's our goal. They bring in some really top end bands,
Uh-huh.
uh, but it's great for our band to go and watch them, and so we just learned a lot doing that. And I mean, personally, and I hate to say this, and I'll say it publicly, but if I had to pick one, I'd take the brass band. I just love playing it. It's just the sound of the brass band,
Yeah.
and
Huh.
and that's with me playing the soprano cornet, which is a beast. But it's just really a lot of fun, and I think everybody who's in it enjoys it quite a bit.
That's all. Yeah. Well, only thing, I know some folks who run brass bands, actually in New Jersey and different areas. And I know they say as far as the technical and the chops and everything you're playing, I mean, you're playing so much more than just the regular standard
Yeah.
concert band music, as you
Well,
know
what
it.
we one of our arguments for doing it was we wanted to have a band that could be a little more selective in membership and challenging in repertoire. And usually it's self-selecting. People get into it and they go, "Oh, this is really hard," But what it does is it enables us to play some more complex music,
Mhm.
and I think everybody has enjoyed the challenge. To be honest, I mean, concert because the town band is a typical community band.
Mhm.
We have a kind of a base level of performance we expect you to be at. We expect you to attend, a certain percentage of the rehearsals before the concerts. But pretty much, if you show up and you have an instrument and you can play decently, you're there. And as the director says, you play what you can, and over time you'll get better. We've watched people do that, and that's really good. And then there are people who kind of get scared of it and leave.
Mhm.
That's okay. There's no prejudice in that. And the only real filter is, again, if you want to play the concert, you have to come to a certain number of rehearsals.
Right.
And if you don't do that, then the director will say, we'll see you Monday after the concert. And maybe you'll have enough next time. And that doesn't happen very often. So, it's so that's one of the big differences between those two bands is that, a little more selective, a lot more challenging.
Yeah, and it seems like you fell, fit into a need too, especially with the war college and obviously the smaller venue, taking smaller groups, out, to as you said, the retirement villages and those kind of
Yeah.
things. So it's just very interesting, and that was going to be my question about competing, but you already answered that. I was wondering and that's cool. You're kind of heading towards that direction,
Yeah.
because
We,
that's
we, we have a feel for where we need to be if we want to do that. And so, like I said, playing that piece this year, the Imogene Holst piece was kind of an internal test for us.
yeah,
Can we do this, and continuing to find more challenging pieces, and we have a number of really great musicians in the brass band. And one of the neat things about the Carlisle area is there are there are multiple community bands. I mean, I can run off probably 10 off the top of my head, all around us, going as far south as Shippensburg and Chambersburg, all the way past Harrisburg, and into the east and west. And they're all are good bands, but over the years, we've kind of become, and this is just my assessment, but I don't think anybody would argue with me. We've kind of become the center point of all those bands.
mhm,
And one of the reasons is one of our big concerts every year is we do a Grand Sousa concert.
yeah,
And we've done that now for going on, this year's the 37th year we've done it. We bring in an external conductor, we bring in a guest performer, and we do a very traditional Sousa style concert. This year, Yari Villanueva is scheduled
mhm,
to come and conduct.
mhm,
He's working with our director right now on the playlist for it, and we would invite members of all the other community bands around us to join us, and we were the core. What I've noticed over the past 5 or 6 years is, our core, which was previously 30 or 40 musicians, is now fixed 50, 60, 70, because many of the players in those other community bands have now become permanent members of our band.
wow,
So although we are the Carlisle band, we have
right,
members who come all the way up from Frederick, Maryland. We have members that are in the Greater Harrisburg Concert Band in Harrisburg, and then all the other community bands around us have members that are in our band as full-time members, and that has just made the band that much stronger.
that much stronger. That's neat. And it's
Yeah,
neat
it
that
is.
you've kind of and I don't want to say it's the wrong way either, is like you've kind of allowed the members to come through and they participate in the other groups and all of that. It's like, oh, you're all working together, which
Yeah,
sounds great.
there's there is a lot of sharing between all these bands. In fact, the only the only competition we have and I'll come out and say is we have a very good choral group in town, and we
Mhm.
have the West Shore Symphony, and synchronizing our schedule and those two
Yeah.
is
Mm.
always an interesting fist fight.
Yeah.
And mostly it's because of venues. There are really
Yeah.
only two good venues in town. There we have a beautiful old Art Deco theater downtown where
Okay.
we do the Grand Sousa concert,
Mhm.
and then the high school, Carlisle High School, has a very nice auditorium with a huge stage. But everybody's kind of on the same rhythm and trying to get those places reserved to work around each other. Uh, has been a challenge at times,
Yeah.
but we work together and sort it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Understand that. So let's kind of switch our focus now to the kind of
Sure.
the Carlisle band. I know you've answered a lot of, my focus with its traditional
Yeah.
community band, kind of everybody else's, involved. Anybody's allowed to be involved with it, I'm assuming, that kind of thing. And I guess if you could talk a little bit more about, the group and, what kind of performances you do, and, if someone wanted to be involved with the Carlisle band, how that works, that kind of thing.
Yeah. We rehearse every Monday night in the Carlisle Band Hall, which sits right across from the old city cemetery. As we always tell people, find Faye's restaurant in the city cemetery, and we're right across the street from the cemetery. Uh, Basically, the filter is our director Dave Rohr, and then the
Mhm.
individual section leads who kind of figure assess where people fit
Mhm.
and put them in. One of the neat things about the band is we've had a series of directors who came out of the high school.
Okay.
Um, we had a wonderful man named Clyde Barr, who for many years had that when Carlisle High School had probably one of the finest high school bands in Pennsylvania, if not the country. Just a
Mhm.
phenomenal band.
Mhm.
And then he was later replaced by Dave Rohr, who's our current town band director. And Dave was there for, I think, 30 or 35 years. Dave's one of those guys who's 5 years older than me, looks like he's 15 years younger than me.
Mhm.
Uh, just a ball of energy. And he has an amazing connection with the alumni of the high school. And so, if anybody comes back to town that ever plays with Dave, probably the first phone call they get is from Dave saying, "Hey, you still got your horn? You want to play with us?" So, what that has done is it's brought in a number of younger musicians. Brings the average age down, brings in some new energy,
Mhm.
and these are folks that many of them were music majors in college
Mhm.
or music educators in college or just played in the band in college,
Mhm.
and we'll get them for a few years, then they may get married and have kids, but we know we're going to get them back,
Mhm.
and so that's happened. They're there, they don't play for 5 or 6 years. The kids get old enough, and then one of them comes back.
Mhm.
So that just brings the age down and just keeps things going. The other thing is, I'm amazed at how many people we get who just come to a concert
Mhm.
and then they call us up and say, "Hey, I used to play. I'd love to play. What do I got to do?" And we bring them in and give them a chance to sit in and see where they fit. And some of them stay, some of them go, but that
Mhm.
helps us this gradual growth in the band. And so there's not a churn, and that's the best thing. There's
Yeah.
not a churn. There's a core that's been there a long time, and
Mhm.
and and kind of keeps things going. But there's always this inflow of new people coming in. The other thing we get, which I think is really kind of neat, is the work college.
Mhm.
We get 350 work college students who come in every year to Carlisle, and not only the students themselves, but their families. Every year we'll get one or two who come to us. We had a marvelous bassoon player a couple of years ago whose husband was in the class, and she came and played with us. I mean, she was a superb bassoon player.
Mhm.
This year we have two trumpet players that are spouses who played in college and wanted to pick it back up again. We had
That's neat.
another lady who's homeschools her kids, so she comes, she plays trombones, and she brings her two sons, and they play with us. So I mean, there's just all these various ways people come into the band, and then they go out and sell it also. So
Mhm.
it's just this, it's been very neat to watch. Like
Yeah.
I said, the problem we have now, we're outgrowing the band hall. I mean, we before COVID, we were actually sitting there talking about what do we do? Do we go to an A band and a B band? Do we try to extend the band hall? That kind of got shut off when we looked at how much that would cost. Um, but we're in the boat now of looking at that again, and because we
Wow.
don't want to push anybody away. I mean, if you can,
Yeah.
if we, again, we're a community band. We want to give everybody an opportunity to participate.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I know it's great that you're like nurturing that because as I said a couple times, it's people kind of fall off, and I know life happens and
Yeah.
priorities and all of that, but it's nice to see that there's opportunity. You know what I mean? That's out there. And you're
Well,
providing that
it's fun. You get the
opportunity.
people who come back, when the kids get into junior high, and you get the people who come back when the kids are in college, looking for something to do. But I mean, I'm just amazed at some of the marvelous musicians we have who just show up and just, hey, I want to play, and you go, where have you been hiding? You're really good. We're glad to have you. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah, and if I may ask too, kind of on that same lines of how community bands and how that atmosphere is with that we talk about that intergenerational group,
Yeah.
right? Of all ages. I was just wondering, how, and I know you're not in the seat of the director. I understand that, but I know you have seen it as being
Yeah.
more the administrator. How would you describe the success of that? And what I mean by that, let me just kind of talk a little bit more about it. Is more of everybody's on different levels of where they are in musicianship, right? Different techniques, and some have been playing for 50 years, and some have been playing for 5 or
Yeah.
2. You get where I'm going with that.
Absolutely. And I put it this way. I'll say Dave Rohr, our director, handles that remarkably well. He's not afraid to tell somebody, "Hey, you probably should sit out this time." He goes out of his way to distribute solos, if you will, work with the section leaders. Hey, let's give this person a chance. Let's do that. He came to me a couple months ago, and said, "Hey, Jim, what would you think about moving this one player, for example, from the second cornet section up in the solos?" And I said, "I think it's a great idea. He's playing on the front row in the brass band. He's more than capable of doing it. We know that one of our other players, may be aging out here fairly
Mhm.
shortly. He's been talking about, so I said, yes, it makes sense. We need to move this guy up. He's capable of playing it and work on the section. Um, and so we do at the same time, we have some superb musicians who don't want to play in the first seat. They're happy to sit down there and play second or third.
Mhm.
And that's good because you need strength down there.
Yeah, you do.
And you really do. And the brass band's a perfect example of that. I mean, what differentiates top brass bands from second tier ones is not the solos; it's
Yeah.
the second and thirds. It really is. So, our director is really good at that, and so he works with the section leaders and just kind of works, gentle nudges
Yeah.
and discussions on how to do it. I have had to tell people in the brass band that maybe it's time for you to not be playing with us anymore. I mean, you're not up to the music. And
Right.
the 2 times I've had to do it, they both went, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not."
Right.
And so they stepped aside.
Yeah.
Um, but that doesn't happen very often. I mean, again, usually it's self-selection. That's what I see. Is,
Yeah.
people get to the point they go, "I just can't handle this,"
That's
and
it.
then they'll give you whatever reason, but they
Yeah.
make that call and
Yeah.
gracefully exit, and it's fine.
Yeah, huh, that's interesting. It's interesting to how folks will do that, and kind of challenge themselves or encourage themselves, or just like you said, take the spot to do something else, or step back. You know.
Well,
Well,
the good both directors, what I like about them is that they, for example, solos, they'll go out of their way to kind of work their way down the section and say, hey,
mhm,
I think this person can do it. Why don't we let them do it this time and
yeah,
that, and so it's not just always the same
the
person
same
playing.
person. Yep.
It's giving other players an opportunity to move up, and we have a couple of really good young musicians, recent graduates from Penn State and other places, and so we make the most of them.
Mhm.
They're young and they're enthusiastic and they play really really well. So we're not going to bury them down in the section. We're going to give them a chance to show how good they are.
It's nice how you describe the kind of the passing of the voice, because like I'm like you, I'm a part's a part, a part's important, and it's nice how it seems like there's a lot of variety there, because I think that really helps build confidence and build obviously musicianship, because there might be a time when someone might need to do it because
That's exactly right. That's right. Everybody, all four of you need to be familiar with that solo because anyone might have to play it. So,
yeah, right. Because you never know.
right.
So
Things
I,
happen.
I wanted to talk a little bit about how you're talking about this tier of groups, and
Yeah.
was interested if you could talk a little bit more about that, and just as well as, and I know how you explained it, and I'm thinking in my head too, like for example, I'm from the east coast of Pennsylvania, so like the Allentown band is way up there, right, on the
Right. Right.
post. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm just interested, I guess more about how the Carlisle band is really pushing themselves and challenging themselves to get there. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying that this is not a ego thing. This is not a
No.
competitive thing. I know it's not you coming from there, but I'm hearing, a strategy to do the best you can, and
Yeah.
that's what I'm after, and asking this
No,
question.
I think what it is that there's a collective feeling that we want to be the best possible band we can and to try playing new and intriguing music.
Right.
What I push both the directors on is we need to do things that make us unique.
Mhm.
And I'll give you two examples. In the town band, we have a very good trumpeter who's sitting on playing second or third, could be playing solo first,
Mhm.
named Dave Kammerer, Dr. Dave Kammerer, who was the director of music at BYU, Hawaii,
Okay.
and then moved back to Pennsylvania, where he's from. He went to Susquehanna, and this is home. So he came back, and he has been our resident composer in the
Oh,
town band. So here at a community band,
wow.
we have a resident composer, and for the last 2 or 3 years, we've had at least one piece every year that is one that he is either composed for the band or rearranged from something he did when he was at BYU for the band. You're not going to hear those pieces anyplace else, and that's just neat to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And
that
and,
is
and
neat.
we just tell people, look, this is a unique opportunity, and we're going to make the most out of that and do stuff that you won't hear anyplace else.
Mhm.
The other one is Paris Chambers. Paris Chambers was from the Carlisle area. He grew up in Newburgh. He lived in Newville, or he's buried in Newville, but he actually conducted the band for a short period of time before he passed away in the early 20th century.
Mhm.
So we have somebody that's kind of our native son. So
Mhm.
we kind of go out of our way to find Paris Chambers pieces and try to
That's
do
nice.
one in every concert because he's one of ours.
Yep.
The one I've been pushing on, and I have had a lot less luck, mostly because it's just hard to find the music, is trying to do stuff to commemorate the Carlisle Indian Industrial School Band.
Oh, okay.
That's the other great band in the history of Carlisle.
Wow.
Uh, I always tell people when you think about, I'm going to talk about this if I get to present next year at the band conference, but when you think about the Carlisle Indian School, most people think of Jim Thorpe.
Mhm.
They think of the Carlisle Indian football team with Jim Thorpe and Pop Warner.
Mhm.
But what the third thing they don't think about, but they probably should, was something that was even more famous at the time, and that was the Carlisle Indian Industrial School Band,
Oh,
which
mhm.
was a very good touring band. It marched at inaugurations, it played at national expositions, um, and a number of it had a couple of members that went on to the Sousa Band. It had several well-known directors that continued on after the Indian School, after they left the Indian School, and so trying to find things we can do that help celebrate that heritage.
Mhm.
We have taken one piece we have found. There was a Carlisle Indian School march that was composed by Dennison Wheelock. We were able to get that. All we could find was a piano score, but we had an arranger who arranged that for us. That was, again, Dave Kammerer helped us do that.
Mhm.
So that's a piece that we can play that's not played anyplace else.
Mhm.
Wheelock actually had several other pieces he composed. We were still chasing down. We actually have parts of a symphony he wrote. And one of
Wow.
my long-term challenges to Dr. Kammerer is, take these parts we have and see what we can put together and come up with something that we can do with that. So it's looking for opportunities like that. What are things we can do that are absolutely unique that you won't hear anyplace else that show that this is a special thing that helps commemorate the musical heritage of the area and the band and some of our ancestors in the band. We did another. Dave Kammerer wrote an original piece for us last year called Susquehanna Echoes, I think it was. But we
Yeah.
did a premiere performance of it.
Wow.
He wrote another piece that was last year that we played with a brass quintet accompanied by the full concert band,
Hmm.
and which was really really interesting thing to play. So it's doing new things like that with the band. It's not just
Hmm.
playing all the old war horses. It's finding new stuff.
Yeah.
Our director, he's got plenty of friends that are composers and arrangers, and so he's always bringing stuff in. And so it's just looking for that. So you play you play a mix. You play some of the old war horses. You play some things that everybody wants to hear. Stars and Stripes Forever.
Right.
You always throw that one in there, but then looking for these new opportunities.
Yeah. It's the variety, I think. That's kind of
Yeah,
what you're describing, and especially, I just want to point out the side of history, and I know it's just awesome to see groups that existed before us and what they did for the kind of the community, and I know that's how we met through East Coast Band Conference, because
yeah.
that's what essentially the conference is about. But it's just nice to, kind of think through those different groups, and especially when it's of your area, and show that heritage.
We have two great resources that we try to leverage. One is the Army Heritage and Education Center, again, which is in the process of digitizing all of its archives, but it has a huge collection of stuff, to include a big one on military music. And so we've been able to find photographs and things, and programs and things like that. The other one is Dickinson College, which
Mhm.
has a great collection on the Carlisle School, on the Indian School. And so they are also in the process of digitizing that. I'm always finding new stuff that they've digitized, and that's in fact where we found some of these parts for one of Wheelock's compositions. So the more they do, the more we find.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's neat. That's very neat. It's like a puzzle,
It
putting it
is.
all together.
It really is. Just today, I was looking up some more stuff, and I found a bunch of stuff from a professor up at University of Nebraska at Lincoln, who posted a bunch of his research stuff that he had found on the Indian school bands throughout the whole structure of Indian schools.
Right.
So I bookmarked a bunch of stuff there that I need to dig into, because it had a lot more information on Wheelock than I had found any other place.
Yeah.
So that was worthwhile.
Wow. That's great. Well, I'm excited. As time goes on, I want to see what you're going to keep finding.
Yeah.
I know
Well,
you
one
get
thing
that
we found, it's
presentation.
it's funny. We were looking at pictures on the wall. This is my last thing I'll say about the band.
Okay.
We do have a pretty good collection of pictures of the band,
Hmm.
starting in the late 19th century through today. And one of the neat things about Carlisle is it's a small town. I mean, right
Hmm.
now we just hit, I think, 24,000 people in the borough. So we're a quarter of the size of Reading,
Hmm.
as a comparison. When you look at those pictures, you can go all the way to the first pictures we have, and you can look at the names of the people that are in the picture, and you will recognize them as names that are still in Carlisle today, in businesses that still exist, in leaders in the town, and it just shows how important over the years that band was,
Yeah.
and how the continuity of families in the band. And we still have that. We have one of our flute players was the first woman in the band, and
Wow.
her brothers and her father, and probably ones past that, were in the band before her. And so we have that continuity, which is just neat to see
Yeah,
that.
that is neat.
So,
Well, as we're wrapping this up, I thought this is kind of, and it's a loaded question. I will say that, as I actually ask all kind of my participants on this. So you seem, and you've kind of answered this already, that there seems like on more in Carlisle, there seems like there's a lot of opportunity to make music. Okay, which is
yes.
great. I wanted to just get your opinions, your words of wisdom, we will say, as far as, folks who are interested in playing music, who might have not played in a while. And I know we covered it a little bit, or those people who, did stop and, have not continued, or the ones that are still continuing. What your suggestions are, what you say to people, as either as a president or as a musician or, part of the Carlisle band or beyond, and I was just interested if you would kind of end our podcast with that.
Sure. What I would say is, one, dig that horn out of the closet, whatever it is. Clean it up, make sure it can still play. Take it to the music shop, let them do a quick look at it, make sure it's good. And give yourself a little bit of time to be refamiliarized with it. But once you think you're comfortable with it, look for a community band. I can tell you in our area, I said every decent sized town around us, whether it's Mechanicsburg, Camp Hill, um, New Cumberland, Shippensburg, they all have community bands, and they're all looking for players. And everybody needs another trombone player. Everybody needs another French horn, another clarinet. We usually have too many trumpets, but we won't push it. We won't throw them away. For some reason, right now we have 5 or 6 euphoniums, which I find amazing. Uh, but the best way to get back into it is get in a group, whether it's a quintet or a town band or something. Just get in with somebody and just start playing together, and it'll come back. I've got a couple of friends I'm still working on that. Oh, it's been too long. I can't do it. And I'm like, oh, if you get there, you hit every other note. That's okay. It'll come back. And we're very supportive of people who want to be there and put the effort into it. And then if you do it and then you decide it's not for you, that's fine. But most of the people that do it, we find stick with it. And I always give the example. We have one alto sax player that I can remember when I first came back to the band, who wasn't very good. I'll be very blunt. He would tell you he wasn't very good. He's now a very, very solid alto sax player. Why? Because he just kept at it and kept playing and got in a couple of different groups and just kept at it. And it's turned out to be a pretty good one. Our tuba player in our quintet did not play tuba until he was an adult. He was in percussions, and he decided he wanted how to play tuba. Now he plays in the band, and he plays in the brass quintet that I have, and he's a pretty solid tuba player. So that you can pick these things up or repick them up, and just it just takes initiative and the time to practice. But there are plenty of resources out there. And if you don't have an instrument, I always tell people I can't do it. I don't have an instrument, and I always say, "What do you want to play? What instrument do you want? I'll find you an instrument." And I've never had a problem finding an instrument for somebody because, all of us have instruments in our closet or know somebody who does, and we'll find you an instrument. So don't and we have some instruments in the band that we can loan out. So just don't keep that as a reason not to start it up. We'll find you an instrument. So that's if you want to do it, give it a try.
Very well said.
Yeah,
Yeah, I kind of agree. I know there's tons of resources out there, and just like you said, go to concerts,
yep,
see them, talk to the folks, they'll help
yeah,
you. They'll help you get started. I mean, just like you're,
yeah,
and don't take it as a sales pitch, but you say it very well, come out.
yeah.
Don't let anything be a barrier, because I mean,
Right.
that's what it's all about. I mean, just like you, I know you stopped for a while, and here you are. So,
And I'll tell you, I really feel it, the appreciation when we go to a lot of these retirement homes, and you just they the residents there really enjoy it, and they want to hear they want to hear toe tappers, and they want to hear fun stuff, and they just enjoy it. And I can remember the most meaningful one I ever did was with a quintet. We went into the Alzheimer's, the dementia part of a
mhm.
retirement home, and we're sitting there playing, and all of a sudden we didn't stop, but we got really quiet because everybody was singing along. We were playing
Wow.
hymns, classic hymns, and they were singing along with all the hymns. And I just went, wow, that was worth it right there. That we hit that bit of memory popped out, and
Yeah.
it was really neat. So,
One thing that you just reminded me of, one of the first community bands that I was involved in as a director, we went to a retirement home, and there was a gentleman there who came, listened to us, loved hearing, and he's like, "Oh, I play trumpet," that kind of thing. And I was like, "Oh, cool." And I said, if you want to join us?" And he's like, "Oh, no, that's all right. Okay, well, I will." So he comes up, and like we take our break. He comes up and he brings his trumpet out, and he starts like warming up on one of the polkas of Herbert Clark.
yeah.
And I'm just thinking in my mouth, I'm just like putting my mouth back, like, oh man. He's like, "Yeah, I play a little." And I was like,
Yeah,
Because I thought, if he played a few notes, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
he
we've had a
ended up,
few. We've had more than a few like that who showed up. Yeah,
yeah, and they
you
show
got
up and he's just like, I mean, he was just amazing. And it was just, he's retired. So, he loved it and he ended up joining our band for a few years and,
yeah,
so it's just wonderful. So, well, thank you, Jim. I appreciate, you taking the time to come on this podcast. I know, again, the point of this podcast is just to talk to
yeah.
fellows people like yourself, who have really put a lot of time and service into the community band, what I'll say era, where you're trying to really keep it alive, keep it moving forward. So I thank you for that. As well as, I will thank you for your service, with all the military and especially keeping all those traditions alive. So I did want to say that too, because when I met you, I just knew, I know you put the time and effort into it, and that's what I wanted to spotlight tonight.
Oh,
So,
good. Well,
thank you so much.
I'm glad to do it. And one quick advertisement: www.carlisleband.org is the Carlisle Band's website. And anybody who's interested, lots of information, pictures, and information about the band as well as our schedule.
Yeah, thank you. And then again, if you can't join, you can always watch concerts. I will say
That's
that.
right. Yeah. We welcome.
Thanks so much, Jim.
Thank you.